Hey everybody, my name's Mike Montgomery, and in today's video, we're gonna be taking this old, outdated kitchen in my income property and renovating it into this fresh, new kitchen on Modern Builds. Whenever we first bought the income property, there was a dividing wall in between the living room, kitchen, and dining space. So the first thing I did was hire a licensed contracting crew to take down that wall, install a new beam, and open everything up. And make sure and stay tuned to the end of the video for a full price breakdown. After that, I was able to start the demolition process by removing the laminate floors, exposing the original linoleum tiles. And these floors are super rough, so we'll probably be doing continuous floors, everything new. On this side of the kitchen, I've got 3 different doorways converging for the kitchen, the bathroom, and the garage. I think I'll be taking out this whole frame. But first, I got a hand from my dad whenever he got off work, moving all of the appliances out of the kitchen and into the shop. If I remember correctly, these appliances were just installed about 4 years ago, and they're in really great shape. There's nothing wrong with them. We just want a new, contemporary, or more modern finish. And these appliances are still good, so we're gonna find some friends or family that can use these rather than just selling them on Facebook Marketplace. Goodbye time. I've got big plans for this whole peninsula area. I want it to be all counter height instead of tiered. Whoa! So the first step in that process is getting rid of this bar height section. Not only was it screwed down to this half wall, but it was construction adhesived up. With a crowbar, I was able to get it loose though, and then I moved to removing the backsplash, and this has a matching tile. We're gonna be replacing this with a new one, and you're gonna like the way it looks. I guarantee it. I don't know why I did so much damage to the sheetrock on this wall, it was just stuck on there. All right, so that drywall is gonna need repairing, but at least we got the backsplash down. After the sink was out, we decided to try taking out the countertops in one go rather than me breaking them apart and taking them out in pieces because I figured that would risk damaging the cabinets, and I don't want to do that because we're reusing them. Bah! Super pro. You know, this dumpster really isn't filling up that fast.
But you got a 20-yard dumpster for the price of 10.
That is true, we got a discount. I want to make this doorway higher. We're gonna expose the framing and see what we can cut away. Up inside the attic, I could tell this was not a load-bearing wall. It's running the same way that all the ceiling joists are, and it's not interacting with them at all. Awesome, that's way better. The little half wall in front of these cabinets is also not load-bearing, but I did not need to go into the attic to figure that out. I had already turned off the power to the whole house during the demo process, so I removed the outlet and then snaked the wire back through the holes in the 2x4 studs and knocking down the half wall. This thing hung in there pretty well, but I was able to wiggle it out and get it out to the dumpster. Our kitchen's feeling way more open and there's a ton more light. And the cool part is we are now rebuilding instead of demoing out this whole space. I'm doing a little bit of drywall repair around the doorway opening, or what used to be the doorway opening. I'm far from a drywall expert, but I have gained a ton of experience by working on this house compared to when I started. And one thing I've really liked using is this plastic corner bead with spray adhesive. So, these upper cabinets are a little bit wonky. Not only are they coming off of the wall a little bit, if you look up on the top, you can see that the plastic angle brackets are broken. So we're gonna bring this cabinet down, that way I can repair it before we throw it back up. Nice. Success! I kept this fix as simple as possible by using these little metal angle brackets I picked up from the store. Since all of the panels were still in good shape, they had just become disconnected. With all that complete, I grabbed a 1/2-inch sheet of drywall and I cut a custom piece to fit underneath that cabinet we just repaired. I needed to make 2 openings for a switch and an outlet, and I used an oscillating multi-tool with a plunge blade, which worked great. We'll end up replacing the other damaged backsplash drywall eventually, but for now, this is gonna allow me to put that other piece of plastic corner bead in. Then I could grab my all-purpose joint compound and start floating coats over all of these repairs. And it might be tough to see, but I used fiberglass mesh tape everywhere that I've got seams because cracks are whack. These 2 cables coming down from the ceiling lead to a set of switches and then a wire going through the floor leading to nothing. After a little investigating, we realized we could remove this whole little setup because we've got 2 sets of switches running 2 sets of lights in the kitchen. So we're gonna simplify all of that by taking those wires out and then having all of the lights in the kitchen run off of 1 switch. And before he headed out, Andy gave me the green light to go ahead and cover this small wall. I made sure I kept access to the wiring we exposed earlier on in the video, and then my dad used my drywall sander on the kitchen ceilings, just smoothing everything out. So not only are we reconfiguring these upper cabinets, you'll probably notice that the top line of them isn't straight.
So let's remove them.
Let's do it. As you could imagine, this was a simple, straightforward process. But it did take a minute to find all the screws.
There it is. And we're up. One cabinet gone.
Success. All right, let's get the rest. Nice rhyme. This is where I'm gonna mention, if you haven't already, make sure and click like and subscribe down below, along with the notification bell. That way you stay updated every time I post new renovation videos.
Last one.
Super pro. Along the length of this wall, there was quite a bit of waviness in the sheetrock, so I grabbed my skim coating blade and I went over the whole thing with joint compound to smooth it out. This is one drywall tool that I really would highly recommend checking out. I masked off all of my cabinets after the joint compound had dried and I sanded it smooth, and now it was time to go to the store and rent an actual texture sprayer. This was a really fun machine to use, and you want to make sure and dial it in before you actually go spraying your walls.
I think that's it.
It's a simple machine to use, a lot like a paint sprayer. You just want to make sure that you're not making any recognizable patterns.
I'll have a backsplash underneath the cabinets so I don't have to spray the whole thing.
I textured the entire house in 1 day, whereas if I skim coated the whole house, that would have taken over a week, I guarantee it. I applied a coat of primer to the walls and ceiling with my Wagner Control Pro 170 sprayer. I did this to save paint since all that new joint compound is super porous. I've used Wagner sprayers for some pretty big projects, including this house, my Joshua Tree house, even the school bus tiny house project. They've worked well for me, and I'd recommend them for sure.
The color I'm using is called Whipped Cream. It's just a slightly soft off-white. There's no warm or cool tint to it. Since this is paint and primer in one, it's supposed to cover a painted wall in one coat, but because I had all of the raw joint compound, I needed to do primer first.
This went great, and it is becoming a night and day difference between what this whole kitchen looked like before and where we're at now. I honestly thought I was going to be putting down new floors on top of the original linoleum, but I realized I needed to take these out so that the plywood subfloor underneath would be on the same plane as the hardwood floors in the living room. That way I could have continuous, seamless floors throughout the whole space. The adhesive in the center of the kitchen area especially was really tough to remove. I used the oscillating multi-tool with a pry bar attachment, and that worked pretty well, but I eventually moved to a chisel attachment for the reciprocating saw, and even though it did a little damage to the plywood subfloor, not much at all, it definitely worked the best. And a razor blade style scraper was able to clean up everything left. Our next big step is laying down some luxury vinyl plank specific underlayment. This is going to give us some cushion. It's also half the thickness as the original linoleum tile, and that gives us the perfect height to bring us up to plane with the rest of the flooring. The luxury vinyl plank flooring I'm using is from a company called Floret, and it's got this awesome gray wash color to it, and it's so easy to install. In this video, I'm just going to be doing a quick time lapse of the install, but I do have a full installation tutorial if you want to check that out. I chose the gray wash because it matches and complements the cabinets really well without competing like 2 different wood tones would. And below I'll leave an affiliate link to 50% off a sample pack. We used a simple ledger board to make sure that this time the cabinets got screwed onto the wall really straight, and I made sure to attach them to 2x4 studs.
One down.
We shifted the entire cabinet assembly about 1.5 inches to the left so that it'll be centered over the new stove and microwave. I was just super happy there was already a filler block on that side that we were able to cut down.
Careful.
And really quick, I'm just gonna give a big thanks to my dad for all the help during this kitchen renovation, because looking back on this footage editing, I realized just how often he came to give me a hand after he got done with work. So thanks again, and make sure and leave a comment to Gary down below. Let him know that we all appreciate it. Woo! The next day, I went to Lowe's to procure more matching cabinets. I gotta give a shout out to everybody on Instagram who let me know that there were matching cabinets, the exact same style as what were already in the kitchen, available in store at Lowe's. So I loaded up what I needed into the truck, and then I took them back to the income property to get them installed. It's pretty cool because we're expanding this kitchen with a lot more usable storage. For instance, we're going from a 36 to a 30-inch stove and microwave situation, but the cool part is we get to add this new vertical cabinet on the other side. This gives us more storage and more countertop space. I also added a bunch of cabinets around the refrigerator because remember, there were no cabinets around the fridge before. And I was super excited when I realized I got to reuse this 36-inch wide short upper cabinet that used to go above the stove because it's the perfect width to go over the fridge. And for anybody curious, this is the Denver line of cabinets. It's sort of the wood natural tone that Lowe's carries. They've also got some pretty nice, slightly more modern looking shaker style cabinets, and that's probably what I would have used if I wasn't mostly reusing the cabinets I already had. I really think balancing out the space with gray wash floors was the secret to making this whole look modern. Adding this extra base cabinet gives us a 30-inch longer peninsula, which is going to be awesome for entertaining.
Now that is super pro.
With walls, floors, and cabinets complete, this kitchen is taking on a whole new look. And if you don't remember, check out these befores. What a big difference. But let's keep moving. And now, drum roll please, it's time to install the Hisense over-the-stove microwave range hood combo. This installation wasn't too tough, and I'll show you all the major steps, but I want to give a big thanks to Hisense for providing the kitchen suite of appliances for this video. Links are below.
Your microwave should also come with a template for your top cabinet. This will help us lay out lines where we need to cut out for our vertical exhaust.
This style of microwave and vent hood combo can either recirculate the air venting out the front, or you can flip the fan blower so it vents out the top, like what we're doing. I also added this plug inside of the cabinet for the microwave to plug into, of course, and I did a whole tutorial video on this process. You've probably seen a few cards pop up in the corner of the screen. Those are for in-depth tutorials for any single step in this whole kitchen renovation. But wiring this outlet was super simple. The black wire goes to the gold screw, the white wire goes to the silver screw, and then the ground to the green one. There you have it.
And now it's time to get the microwave in place.
We're gonna take it, set the bottom in first, then pivot it up and lock it in.
That looks awesome. And I love that the cabinet comes down just a tiny bit further.
Yes.
That looks great. Booyah! All right, now my dad's gonna hold the microwave in place while I get the mounting screws locked in from the inside of the cabinet.
Finally, we could do a quick test to make sure it turns on.
It works! And then this is how you actually turn the vent on. Whoa! That's a lot of air.
Sawdust.
All right, Dad, thank you again for the help.
You're welcome.
Now it's time to exhaust the microwave. As you can see, we've got a vent right here in the ceiling, but it is not ported through the roof. It exhausts any smoke, grease, whatever, just into the attic space. And that is not super pro. That means that this microwave vent hood combo is an even bigger improvement than I was initially planning. I double checked in the attic to make sure that this hole that I'm making isn't interfering with any of the ceiling joists or roof joists, so that way I've got a clear path for my ducting. This roof vent was a really simple install, but boy was I nervous cutting into the actual roof of the house. This wasn't a measure twice, cut once scenario. This was a measure 8 or 9 times and then finally cut apprehensively type scenario. All's well that ends well, and we ended up having a really great fit. The ducting was able to feed through the drywall and into that vent, and I duct taped everything really tight so that it stays secured. This was a fun thing to figure out how to put together because I'd really never done ducting before, but I got this cool 6-inch ducting kit that I used to cut a couple of custom-sized pieces to kind of sandwich together and work around the cabinets. Once again, I locked all of these in place securely with duct tape. I ended up coming up with a pretty creative solution to covering all of this exposed ducting. I basically made a folding miter using the drywall.
This U-shaped piece of sheetrock is basically gonna go around the ducting, covering all of it up. And then I'll make sure to texture it and paint it, that way everything matches and looks consistent throughout the kitchen. These cans of spray texture can be a little unwieldy, and I accidentally applied this a little heavy. I ended up coming back and sanding the texture down just a little bit after I applied paint. That's pretty good if you ask me.
The cabinets are looking great and they're ready for counters. Really quick, I'm gonna get a rough measurement of how many square feet I'll need approximately. That way we'll get better pricing info while we're shopping.
We ended up going to this place, Express Granite, in Oklahoma City.
Oh, that's a good looking one.
Danko Aspen, and then you have the super jumbo slab.
All right, and you said what price on this one?
This is gonna be 52.
Okay.
Installed.
$52 a square foot sounded great, and Carlos came by the next day to take measurements and give a final quote. He had this laser that gave a digital rendering, and then he was able to take that to his workshop where he's got a giant diamond blade CNC countertop cutting mill. This was awesome to see, really cool footage, and I appreciate Carlos letting me into his shop. These were all polished and ready to install the next day, and I was impressed. This crew moves quick. These countertops got measured in one day, cut and installed the next. It was a 2-day turnaround. That's crazy. The laser and CNC cutting process makes custom countertops way quicker than they used to be, and more accurate.
Oh yeah, perfect.
We cut a custom windowsill out of some of the leftover countertop material. It looks killer, and we also made it to where this is a whole undermount sink, even though this type of sink typically isn't undermount. They cut some grooves on the bottom of the countertop that you just saw the hardware slide into, and we'll worry about plumbing later, but check out these counters. In this shot, I am finally getting around to removing the old drywall that was really damaged. This is the drywall that the old Backsplash used to be installed on. Well, it was just way more damaged than I wanted to use to put fresh tile on, and it really only took about an hour and a half to put a couple of sheets up. That way I've got a super flat, clean canvas for my new Backsplash that you're about to see. The tile I chose really rides that modern and traditional line. It's got a modern shape with the elongated hexagon, but the handmade texture gives it a little bit more of a traditional vibe. I began the Backsplash by batch cutting about 15 of these sheets for my base row. I want all of these to be uniform, and I'm using an 1/8 inch wedge spacer underneath between the tiles and the countertop so that they're even with this line that I marked that I made sure was dead level. Working around any outlet or electrical boxes was easy to do. I got a diamond disc for my angle grinder, and it worked great. Just make sure that you don't cut away too much tile, that way your outlet cover is still effective.
So far, our bottom row is looking great, and we're down to our last wall. I'm gonna cut down a full piece that's gonna go into the corner and match the other sheet of tiles. That way we get a really clean, mitered look once we get grout applied.
The second row was really similar to the first, except this time I just used a ton of traditional spacers, making sure that all of my gaps were consistent before installing trim around my edges. And you can install your trim before tile, that way it doesn't shift or move on you during the installation. You could do it either way. I let my thin set cure overnight, and then it was time to mix up some grout. I went with a lower contrast gray.
So I'm gonna start by getting my grout into all of the joints. I wanna press it in, and I also wanna work in multiple directions.
Before I had ever tiled, grouting was one of the steps that I was most intimidated by until I realized it's almost got the most wiggle room of any step. The number one rule is you want to make sure that the grout is seated really good inside of the grout beds, but even if you still got a little bit of haze after using a sponge to clean the face of your tiles, you can use a specialty haze remover like this, and it pretty much always cleans your tile and it's ready to be sealed. I know I saved a ton of money by doing this Backsplash myself, and the cool part is no one would know that it wasn't done by a professional. And next, we're gonna be installing our brand new appliances.
But first, I'd like to give a big thanks to the sponsor of today's episode, Squarespace. If you need a website or an online store, Squarespace is your one-stop shop, and it has never been easier to build your own website. With Blueprint AI, Squarespace's new guided design system, you can build a custom tailored website perfectly suited to your brand or business. And with their enhanced search engine optimization, people will be able to find your website even easier.
There's no limits to the number of products that you can sell using a Squarespace online store, whether that's a physical good, a digital good, or a service product. And online customers have flexible payment options, from credit cards, PayPal, even Apple Pay. And in eligible countries, customers can buy now and pay later with ClearPay and Afterpay. And the last thing I want to highlight is Squarespace Courses. With this, you can turn your knowledge into income. Squarespace has all of the tools to create your course from scratch, whether that's a one-time fee or a recurring subscription charge. So to learn more, make sure and follow my link down in the description, squarespace.com/modernbuilds, where you can build out your entire Squarespace site before entering any of your credit card info. And then don't forget to use my code MODERNBUILDS for 10% off your first site, store, or domain through Squarespace. Thanks again to Squarespace. Now let's finish up this kitchen renovation. I'm excited, it's a big day. It's time to bring in the appliances. And first on the list is our brand new Hisense stainless steel refrigerator. I had these in the shop for a few months waiting for their big unboxing day, and this was pretty much Christmas. To get it through the front door, we had to take the fridge out of the box on the porch. And just look at how clean it is. Double French doors, the drawer freezer, an ice maker, and no visible hardware. And I really like the no-handle design, but we'll get this opened up once it's set in place. I really want to make sure and promote Hisense to the best of my ability, but also be candid. I've got links to all of their products down below if you want to learn more.
I love doing that.
Okay, that looks awesome. Let's get it opened up. And yes, I let everything settle overnight before we installed this and turned it on. It's beautiful. It's got that new fridge smell. And all of these rollers feel really high quality, and tons of storage here in the doors. And room right here if you want to store something tall. I've got to give it to Hisense. This is a very high quality fridge. Up next, we've got our matching modern stainless steel electric freestanding range. Wow, okay, this looks amazing. Let's get it in place. Different houses have all different types of 220 volt outlets depending on what they're used for. So it's typical to wire your own plug onto an electric range. I'm not gonna give a ton of advice here other than just refer to the instructions manual and follow it to the T. If you do that, everything should be good to go. Super Pro. I love the way this looks. Of course, I haven't cooked in here, so I can't review it from that perspective. But I do want to brag a little bit on how symmetrical this stove lined up with our backsplash. And next, we're gonna take care of this gap right here. And I'm pretty sure out in the shop, I've got a filler piece that I can take off of the old bathroom vanity. These pieces were all from the same cabinet set, and I'll be able to cut it to the correct size and then install it onto the cabinet. I know some people are gonna say, I can't believe you didn't turn that into some kind of hidden storage, but right now, I'm just trying to keep it moving. Perfect, let's get the stove back in. And later on, we'll install a toe kick at the base of the cabinet to fill that gap. Ta-da! Nailed it! Well, actually, we screwed it. We screwed that board in. And last, but certainly not least, it's time to unbox our stainless steel Hisense dishwasher. I was really happy with how easy this was to connect. Of course, you've got to plug it in to an outlet, which I had inside of the cabinet, but after that, you just connect your water supply line, and then you connect your drain hose with a hose clamp, and you can slide the actual dishwasher in place, and then screw it into your cabinets. I connected the left side of my dishwasher first because the right side was floating just a little bit. I needed to knock it into place so that there was no gap in between the dishwasher and the end panel. Perfect! I'll take off the stainless steel cover before the reveal at the end of the video, so stay tuned. If I was doing this project again, I wouldn't have removed this drywall texture, but it shouldn't be too quick to replace this with a little bit of drywall thin set to smooth everything out, maybe a couple of coats, then I can come back with a matching texture and paint. Throughout this entire renovation, I realized I've been wasting a whole lot of money on those canned wall texture spray cans because you can use watered down joint compound and a stiff bristled brush to make your own DIY orange peel texture, and you can go as light or heavy as you want to match what you've got. And next, I'm gonna give this a super light sand just so it matches the other texture. Then we can apply paint. Each spray can of that wall texture is about 20 bucks, and I've used probably 6 of them throughout this whole house, so I think I would have saved a lot of money if I realized or had learned this trick sooner. After removing painter's tape, I was left with a clean reveal, but I needed to take care of the transitions between my windowsill with silicone caulk. Basic latex caulk cleans really well with a little bit of soap and water, but if you want to smooth and clean up silicone-based caulk, use a little bit of mineral spirits and it does perfect. We're finally getting around to that toe kick that I mentioned earlier. You can buy these pieces in the cabinet section, and I realize now where stores make all their money, because these kind of end caps and trim pieces are way more expensive than you would think, especially compared to the price of the cabinet boxes. But they're one of those necessary steps to complete the project, so, I guess I get it. Covering this gap next to the range goes a long way in helping things look finished. We're pretty much down to no big eyesores left. Pretty awesome. And this thin bead trim covers the transition between our luxury vinyl plank floors and the cabinet boxes.
And I'll have baseboard trim here, so I'm just gonna use this as a filler piece for now.
And once again, we're gonna transition to working on the floor, back up to the ceiling. I'm gonna remove this old attic vent fan. It was a mess, but it needed to go.
It worked!
The same drywaller I hired to work in the garage did a quick patch here in the ceiling, and you can see the finished result of the texture here. It's just a little heavy.
And I'm gonna sand this patch just a little bit to get the texture to match the rest of the ceiling.
Then I came back with my paint roller and I applied 2 coats so that everything blended away.
So I'm getting really excited because we are making great progress and we're down to the last few steps on getting this kitchen complete. Not to mention, things are looking way better. I'm about to start tackling the lighting, and I picked up this really cool 1 foot by 4 foot surface mount LED. And honestly, installation looks like it's gonna be a breeze. I'm gonna be offsetting the mounting bracket from the electrical box a little bit. That way it's perfectly centered with the microwave in range. But it does wire up just like any other light. Connect black to black, white to white, and the ground either to the ground wire or the electrical box.
And because of this weird lift in the ceiling, I added a spacer to the left side of the fixture to give us a clean reveal.
And I picked up this matching 7-inch LED. It's also got 3 selectable color temperatures. Unfortunately, the bracket on this electrical box broke, but I can use some shims to sandwich it in like an old work box.
And I'll admit that this isn't ideal, but a lot of situations in renovating just aren't. And this solution worked good, especially for a light fixture that basically weighs nothing.
And for above the sink, I've got this really cool looking brass double light fixture. But unfortunately, there's no electrical box, and there's a ceiling joist right here where I would put one that's traditional. So I'm gonna use this, which is called a pancake box. It's a 1/2 inch thick, the same as the drywall, and I'll be able to screw it directly to the joist.
The box wasn't perfectly centered on the joist though, so I added this strip of wood. That way I'd have a couple of contact points to screw into, even though I really only needed to anchor into the joist. From there, I could just go about installing this light as usual, just like it was any other electrical box. And as I got it up there, I was happy everything felt really sturdy. This was a really effective solution. But I did take off the glass covers and I spray painted them with this frosted glass spray paint. That way the light would be a little bit more diffused coming from the fixture and you wouldn't be able to see the light bulbs as clearly. Even when the fixture's off, this gives it a nicer look in my opinion, but when the lights are on, it just gives everything a softer glow.
The sink and faucet combination is super modern. I hadn't seen any like this before. And I want to give a big shout out to Lefton for sending this out.
This is by far the most advanced sink I've ever seen.
This is where there's going to be a knife slot so that they can drain and dry. Your soap dispenser, and we cut this hole out when we made the counters so that this glass rinser can set in right here. All right, we're about to do a first test. Whoa!
Okay, you tell me, have you ever seen a sink with a digital temperature reader and timer? Not to mention a really nice faucet and this crazy waterfall feature. With these sliding baskets, it seems super convenient to wash vegetables and fruit, anything like that. Very cool, moving on.
So this is the old cover for the air conditioner receiver, and it's not terrible, it's just a little outdated. But I found this neat modern one on Amazon for like 15 bucks, and all I have to do to install it is get rid of the old collar in the flap that opens and closes it, and then twist the new one right in. And you can open and close the vent by screwing the vent in the center. I got enough new outlets and switches for the whole house, so let's go ahead and get the kitchen updated. And what's cool is these have USB built in. One thing about these fancy outlets and dimmers is that they're pretty thick in comparison to a traditional outlet, and it really was tough squeezing them into some of these old electrical boxes where they were busy. I always made sure everything was connected good and routed safely though, and I've gotta say, it's a big upgrade having a dimmer switch like this. And the cool part is that you can set how high or low you want the dim to be set whenever you flip the switch on or off. And especially when you buy these in a multi-pack, you can get them for a pretty good deal. And we're down to our final step in this renovation. We've got to handle the front of this island. I added an outlet just to the side. That way if anybody wants to charge a phone or use a small appliance next to it, they can. And FYI, only one of these wires is active, even though I'm keeping both in the wall, just in case anyone doing a future remodel could use it, but I'll be tying into that for the island. And then I ran shielded wire through the cabinets so that I could have a plug on the other end of the peninsula, and I figured this would be great for appliances, something like a blender. I used a 5/8 inch spade bit to drill a pilot hole through my cabinets, and I was sure to secure this cable down with cable clamps. I'm not gonna wire this up yet though. First, I used my circular saw and I cut some 2x4 bracing so that the plywood front to our peninsula has plenty of support. It ended up working out great that the inside of this wall was perfectly flush with the outside face of our cabinet, so after screwing everything together, I could come back with my 3/4 inch sheet of plywood and nail it to the face of the cabinets. Or I guess the back of the cabinets. And you'll notice it's floating above the floors about 1/8 of an inch. And check out what I picked up online to cover this plywood.
These look awesome.
It's basically a wood slat and 1/4 inch felt acoustic paneling. This comes unfinished and you can get it in a few different colorways.
I am really happy because that cut super clean, no tear out, and the felt didn't grab or mess with the blade at all.
The only downside that I saw in this product is that it's a hardwood veneer over MDF, rather than being solid hardwood.
That's one down, let's keep moving.
If I'm being reasonable though, at the price that they're selling these, which is decent, there's definitely no room in the budget for these to be solid hardwood like oak or maple. I really enjoyed this part of the project though. It was fun using these panels and it got my gears turning on how I could come up with some kind of similar alternative that's affordable and completely DIY. So who knows, maybe look forward to that video coming, well, not too soon, but maybe someday. I let the wood filler cure in the brad nail holes, then I sanded everything with 220 grit before applying a coat of Maker brand Simple Finish. And this really made that oak grain pop. Wiring this outlet is as simple as it gets because it's the end of a run, and I put a diagram on the screen in case you are a complete beginner and you're curious. Just remember this rule of thumb I mentioned earlier, that the black wire goes to your gold screw, the white wire goes to your silver screw, and green to ground.
Let's go, that is killer.
Finally, I can install my last 2 pieces of trim, one just to cover the little bit of felt on the side of the cabinet, and the second is just this little bead trim around the floor. And with that, this kitchen renovation is complete. But before we check out the afters, let's remind ourselves of how this kitchen looked when we bought the place. There were a lot of colors on the wall and a lot of different finishes, but none of them were particularly modern. And yes, it was super closed off before we took out this wall and put in the new beam. But now, let's check out these afters. To start, I would just say, wow. We have come so far when it comes to this income property. Because I'm not designing for myself, I didn't push this design as modern as I might if this was the house I was living in. But I am super pumped with how we were able to straddle the line of traditional and modern. Basically, it's up to the decor of this space to decide the overall style.
You could theme it a little more modern or a little more farmhouse, and it would work great in both scenarios. I am very curious to hear your thoughts though. What did you like? What would you do different? All in all though, couldn't be more pumped. We've got a ton more storage by extending out this peninsula. And check out this cool cabinet I forgot to highlight earlier. Really cool corner storage. By far, the Backsplash is my favorite individual project in the space. I'm happy that we updated all of the electronics, and one more huge thanks to Lefton for providing this killer modern sink. So cool.
And now it's time for the price breakdown. As you can see, I spent about $5 grand on this whole renovation. And one more time, I want to give a huge thanks to Hisense for providing these appliances because that went a long way in our budget. I easily think that we increased the selling value of this house by about 25 grand by doing this renovation. I know some people think the equity increase is going to be a little lower or a little higher, but I do think that's ballpark. A kitchen is one of those really big deciding factors when it comes to buying or renting a property. And I just think we've really done great by straddling that modern and traditional line. So as always, let me know what you think down below in the comments about this renovation. Make sure and like, comment, and subscribe, and be sure to hit that notification bell even if you're already subscribed. That way you're sure to know when I post new videos. So that's it. Everybody have a great week, and we'll see you next time on Mike's First Flip.
It's Mike's First Flip.
Playlist link down below, starting from episode 1. Bye.
Subscribe or else.